Hi there. Tonight we wander the torchlit streets of ancient Rome, where the Tiber's muddy ripple mixes with the clatter of carts and the hum of whispered flirtations. You're brushing past toga-clad merchants, their wine-stained breath mingling with the scent of olive oil and fresh-baked bread from a nearby stall. The city pulses with desire. Love and sex aren't just private affairs here. They're the heartbeat of markets, temples, and grand villas. Fair warning, you probably won't survive this heat, the crowds, or the occasional whiff of an open sewer without a strong stomach and a quick wit. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not just a visitor, you're stepping into Rome's rhythm, where every glance and gesture carries a spark of possibility. Sex and love were everywhere, woven into the city's laws, gods, and gossip like threads in a senator's toga. The Romans didn't blush about it. They celebrated, regulated, and sometimes taxed it, making sure every tryst served the empire's greater good. A mainstream fact sets the scene. By the 1st century BCE, Rome's marriage laws, like the Lex Julia, pushed elite couples to produce heirs, tying bedroom duties to civic pride. You're dodging a street hawker, selling dubious love, charms, feeling the weight of that expectation. Producing a citizen wasn't just personal, it was patriotic. You'd probably roll your eyes at the pressure, wondering if anyone got a night off. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans believed certain foods like oysters or fennel could heat up your libido, and vendors like the one you just passed swore by their Venus-approved snacks. Imagine chomping on fennel hoping it works, only to burp during a romantic moment. You'd laugh, but these aphrodisiacs were serious business, hawked with the same zeal as temple offerings. Historians still argue whether this openness about sex was liberating or just another way to control citizens. Some say it gave Romans freedom to explore desire. Others think it trapped them in a web of social rules where every kiss was watched. You're not sure, but the markets buzz, lovers haggling, poets reciting steamy verses, feels alive, like you're in the middle of a very nosy soap opera. You pause by a fountain, its water cool against your fingers, and notice a couple whispering under a laurel tree, their hands brush bold for public, but no one bats an eye. Romans were tactile. Holding hands, even kissing, was fine, unlike the stiff propriety of some neighbors. You're starting to see love as Rome's fuel, not just for babies, but for alliances, status, and survival. Take Venus, the goddess of love. She's not just a statue in a temple, but a force in every flirtation. Her image on coins and tavern signs. You spot a crude graffiti of her nearby, captioned with a cheeky pickup line. The humor hits when you try reading it aloud, mangling the Latin and drawing a smirk from a passing slave. Romans loved their wordplay, and sex was no exception. Poems like Catullus' could make you blush or giggle, depending on your mood. Now picture the streets at dusk, torches flaring as the city shifts from trade to pleasure. You're weaving past insulae, those rickety apartment blocks where plebeians pack in, their laughter spilling from open windows. Up on the Palatine Hill, patricians host lavish dinners, where glances over wine cups set the stage for more. The humor strikes again when you imagine slipping on the uneven cobbles, your grand Roman adventure ending in a faceplant. But you're hooked, drawn to the way sex and love knit this sprawling city together. It's not just about bodies, it's about power, faith, and the human need to connect, whether in a senator's villa or a dockside tavern. As you linger by the Tiber, its current steady and slow, you feel Rome's pulse under your skin, ready to unravel its steamiest secrets, one street at a time. You're standing in the shadow of a grand temple to Venus, its marble steps worn smooth by centuries of sandaled feet. The air hums with the scent of burning myrrh and the faint chant of priests, their voices weaving through the clatter of Rome's streets just beyond. You're not here for a quick prayer. You're diving into the sacred rituals that tied sex to divine favor, where love and lust were offerings to keep the gods smiling. The Tiber's muddy ripple feels close, and you're trying not to trip on a stray incense burner while soaking in the temple's electric vibe. Venus wasn't just Rome's goddess of love, she was a cosmic matchmaker, her influence seeping into every bedroom and battlefield. A mainstream fact grounds us. By the 2nd century BCE, festivals like the Veneralia, held in April, honored Venus with wine, songs, and rituals meant to ensure fertility and harmony. You're watching women in flowing stolas pour libations of honeyed wine onto her altar, their movements graceful but deliberate. You'd probably spill half the jug, earning a priest's scowl. But these offerings were serious. Sex was a divine gift, and pleasing Venus kept Rome's crops and cradles full. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some devotees offered tiny clay figurines of lovers locked in an embrace to Venus's shrine, hoping for passion or babies. Picture yourself handing one over, blushing as the priest raises an eyebrow at your clumsy grip. You'd laugh, imagining the figurine's exaggerated features, like a Roman version of a cheesy Valentine's card. Historians still argue whether these rituals were heartfelt or just social flexing. Some say they deepened personal devotion. Others think elites used them to flaunt piety while eyeing political alliances. You're not sure, but the women's focused faces suggest they're praying for more than just show. You step closer to the altar, where a statue of Venus looms, her marble curves draped in gold cloth that catches the torchlight. The priests sprinkle rose petals, and you notice a few men lingering, their togas crisp, whispering vows for luck in love, or maybe just a good date. The humor hits when you overhear one mutter about his wife's cooking, as if Venus cares about his dinner plans. These rites weren't just for women. Men sought Venus's favor too, especially before weddings or wars, when virility mattered. You recall those fennel vendors from the market, peddling their Venus-approved snacks. Here, that hustle feels sacred, part of the temple's pulse. The air grows heavier as the chants rise, and you feel the weight of this place where sex wasn't just human but holy. You're starting to see how Romans leaned on Venus to bless their desires, from a plebeian's first kiss to a senator's air-making. The temple's glow fades as you slip back toward the street, the Tiber's scent pulling you along. You're carrying a spark of that divine energy, wondering how these rituals shaped Rome's heart, and what other gods might demand a piece of its lovers' souls. You're slipping through the heavy cedar doors of a patrician villa, the air rich with the scent of beeswax candles and roasted peacock from a nearby feast. Mosaic floors glitter under torchlight, and you're tiptoeing past slaves polishing bronze urns, their whispers barely audible. You're not here for the dinner party. You're peeking into the private bedrooms of Rome's elite, where sex and love follow rules as rigid as a consul's toga. The Tiber's distant churn feels like a secret keeper, and you're trying not to knock over a delicate glass vial of rose oil while you snoop. For Rome's patricians, the bedroom was a stage for power, lineage, and carefully curated passion. A mainstream fact anchors us. Under the Augustan laws of 18 BCE, elite marriages were regulated to boost birth rates, with patrician couples expected to produce legitimate heirs to secure family wealth and political clout. You're imagining A senator like Lucius, his toga swapped for a loose tunic, negotiating intimacy with his wife, Claudia, under the weight of imperial decrees. You'd probably trip on the silk bed covers trying to eavesdrop, earning a stern glance. Sex here wasn't just pleasure, it was a duty to Rome itself. Here's a quirky tidbit. Patrician wives sometimes wore gold nets in their hair, even two, bed to signal status and fertility, like a crown for the marriage act. Picture Claudia adjusting hers, only for it to tangle mid-moment. Awkward. You'd chuckle, imagining Lucius politely ignoring the snag. But these symbols mattered, tying beauty to legacy. Historians still argue whether these marriages were cold transactions or held genuine affection. Some point to love letters between elites, like Pliny's to his wife. Others say political alliances trumped feelings with sex, a means to an end. You're not sure, but the tension in the air suggests Claudia's navigating more than just hairnets. You notice the bed, a mahogany frame draped in crimson linen, flanked by frescoes of Venus and Mars, their embrace a not-so-subtle hint. The humor hits when you spot a small statue of Priapus, the fertility god, with an exaggerated feature, grinning from a corner. Talk about bedroom pressure. Patricians like Lucius faced expectations to perform, their virility linked to family honor. Claudia, meanwhile, might wield influence, choosing when or if to conceive, perhaps using those fennel snacks we saw in the market as a subtle boost. You recall the Venus temple's rituals, their sacred offerings echoing here in private prayers for a son to carry the family name. As you ease toward a window, the Tiber's glow catches your eye, and you realize these bedrooms were microcosms of Rome. Orderly, opulent, but simmering with human wants. You're starting to feel the weight of Lucius and Claudia's roles, their love shaped by laws and lineage, yet still seeking a spark. The villa's quiet wraps around you, broken only by a distant lute, and you slip away, wondering what secrets these walls hold, and how even the elite balanced heart and duty in the dark. You're crouched in a cramped back room of a Roman insula, the air thick with the scent of smouldering sage and the faint tang of cheap wine spilled on the floor. A clay lamp sputters, casting jittery shadows on walls scratched with graffiti, some of it too spicy to repeat. You're not here to judge the decor, you're diving into the world of Roman love charms and curses, where spells could ignite a crush or doom a rival's romance. The Tiber's distant slosh seeps through a cracked window, and you're trying not to knock over a pile of wax tablets while you test the magic, hoping you don't accidentally hex yourself. Romans were big on bending fate, especially in love, mixing faith with a healthy dose of superstition. A mainstream fact grounds us: cursed tablets, or deficciones, from the 1st century CE, often found in Rome's wells, invoked gods like Venus or Pluto to bind lovers, or curse cheaters, inscribed with pleas for passion or revenge. You're holding a lead tablet, its surface etched with a plea to make some poor guy, let's call him Gaius, pine for his beloved. You'd probably misspell the incantation, earning a groan from the local witch, but these spells were serious. Love was war, and magic was the weapon. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some charms involve tying a lock of hair to a frog's leg, buried at midnight, to make someone fall hard. Picture yourself wrestling a slimy frog, muttering apologies as you fumble the knot. You'd laugh, imagining explaining this to your friends. Just a Tuesday night in Rome. Historians still argue whether these spells were psychological, boosts, or genuinely believed to work. Some say they empowered the desperate, others think they were scams, with priests or charlatans pocketing fees for guaranteed results. You're not sure, but the tablet's cold weight feels heavy with Gaius's hopes. You glance at a clay jar filled with a love potion, wine, honey, and, suspiciously, fish sauce. The recipe promises to spark desire, but it smells like a tavern accident. The humor hits when you imagine Gaius gagging it down, praying it wins his girl's heart, while his breath screams anchovy. Romans didn't just charm, they cursed too. Another tablet curses a rival, asking Venus to burn her heart for straying. You recall those Venus rituals at the temple, their sacred wine pours. Here, that devotion turns darker, love twisted into vengeance. The witch, a wiry woman with coal-smudged eyes, mutters as she sprinkles ash, her confidence making you wonder if she's onto something. The room feels smaller now, the lamps flicker, slowing your breath. You realize these charms weren't just about love, they were about control, a way to wrestle with the chaos of desire in Rome's crowded streets. You're starting to feel Gaius's desperation, his need to bend fate when a glance or a toga's brush wasn't enough. The Tiber keeps its steady hum outside, and you set the tablet down, wondering if magic ever truly won hearts, or if it just gave Romans a way to dream under the city's relentless sun. You're settled on a worn wooden bench in a plebeian tenement's courtyard, the Tiber's damp breath mixing with the aroma of simmering lentils and fresh laundry flapping overhead. Children chase a stray dog through the dust, and you're catching snippets of a couple's banter from an open window. You're not here to borrow a cup of garum, you're navigating the practical, no-nonsense world of plebeian marriage vows where love among Rome's working class was a gritty partnership forged in survival. The city's hum feels close, and you're trying not to tip your bench while you soak in the everyday rhythm of these unions. For Rome's plebeians, artisans, shopkeepers, laborers, marriage was less about romance and more about teamwork, though affection often snuck in. A mainstream fact grounds us. By the 1st century BCE, confariatio and coemptio marriage rites, common among plebs, were simple ceremonies involving shared bread or a symbolic sale, binding couples without the elite's pomp. You're picturing a baker like Marcus, flour-dusted, exchanging vows with his bride Livia over a crusty loaf. You'd probably drop crumbs during the ritual, earning Livia's playful glare, but this act sealed their deal. Love was nice, but a full granary was better. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some plebeian couples mark their union by tying a woolen thread around their joined hands, believed to knot their fates. Imagine Marcus fumbling the thread, Livia giggling as it unravels. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like a budget wedding ring with extra symbolism. Historians still argue whether these marriages were egalitarian or patriarchal at heart. Some point to women's right to keep dowries as empowering. Others say men held the reins with wives expected to manage the hearth. You're not sure, but Livia's sharp retort to Marcus about his late-night tavern trips suggests she's no pushover. You glance around the courtyard, where laundry sways like flags of domestic life. Marcus and Livia's marriage, like many, started young. Teens, often arranged by parents, but you notice their easy laughter, a sign of something real beneath the practicality. Sex was part of the deal, not just for kids, but for comfort after long days hauling grain or weaving. The humor hits when you overhear a neighbor tease Marcus about his baker's stamina, only for Livia to fire back about his bread-kneading skills. You recall the Venus temple's lofty rituals, but here, love's grounded. Less divine, more human, sealed with bread, not gold. The sun dips, casting shadows across the tenement, and you realize these vows weren't just contracts. They were lifelines, tying couples to Rome's gritty pulse. You're starting to admire Marcus and Livia's balance. their way of blending duty with stolen kisses by the Tiber. The courtyard quiets, save for the dog's yip, and you lean back, wondering how they keep their spark alive in this crowded, noisy world, and what it takes to make love last when life's as tough as a stale loaf. You're wandering the ash-dusted streets of Pompeii, the Tiber's distant cousin Vesuvius, looming silent in the haze. The air smells of baked clay and faint traces of wine spilled in last night's revelry, and you're brushing past walls, painted with vivid scenes that make your cheeks warm. You're not just sightseeing, you're decoding the erotic frescoes of Rome's preserved playground, where art reveals the raw pulse of desire. The city's hum vibrates through the stones, and you're trying not to stumble on uneven cobbles while you unravel these steamy snapshots, hoping no one mistakes you for a nosy tourist. Pompeii's frescoes weren't hidden in back rooms. They were public, splashing villas and taverns with unapologetic intimacy. A mainstream fact anchors us. Archaeological finds from the 1st century CE show homes like the House of the Vetii, adorned with paintings of couples in amorous poses, often alongside myths of Venus or Bacchus. You're staring at a fresco of a man and woman, their limbs entwined, framed by garlands of ivy. You'd probably blush, feeling like you've crashed their private moment, but Romans saw this as art, not scandal. Desire was decor, celebrating life's pleasures. The colors, ochre, crimson, pop even now, pulling you in. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some frescoes include cheeky cupids, chubby and winged, juggling oversized, props to hint at the main event. Picture a cupid hefting a comically large phallus, grinning like he knows the joke. You'd laugh, imagining the artist chuckling as they painted, maybe slipping it past a stuffy patron. Historians still argue whether these images were meant to arouse or educate. Some say they set the mood for banquets. Others think they taught young couples like Marcus and Livia the ropes of romance. You're not sure, but the Cupid's smirk suggests he's not telling. You move to another wall where a nymph and satyr dance, their eyes locked in a way that feels too real for myth. The humor hits when you notice a stray graffito nearby, scrawled by some ancient vandal. Gaius loves Flavia. You recall that love-cursed tablet for Gaius? Maybe this is his handiwork, a public shout of his heart. These frescoes weren't just elite flexes. They spoke to everyone, from senators to slaves, normalizing sex as part of Rome's fabric. You think of the Venus temple's rituals, their sacred offerings echoed here in paint, tying love to the gods. The details, her draped stola, his tousled hair, make it human, not just divine. As you step back, the street's bustle fades, and you realize these frescoes were Rome's pulse, capturing desire in a city that never slept. The Tiber's rhythm, though far, feels alive in Pompeii's stones, and you're starting to see art as a mirror, bold, flawed, and achingly real. You linger, dodging a cart of amphorae, wondering what other secrets these walls hold and how they shaped the heart of those who lived, loved, and laughed under Vesuvius's shadow. You're hunched over a rickety table in a dimly lit Roman taberna, the air sour with spilled wine and the faint whiff of something dubious simmering in a pot. The Tiber's damp breath seeps through a cracked shutter, and you're surrounded by clay jars, some labeled with smudged charcoal scrawls. You're not here for a snack. You're mixing strange brews meant to keep babies at bay, diving into the quirky world of Roman contraception. The city's pulse thrums outside, and you're trying not to knock over a vial of sticky goo while you figure out how Romans dodged parenthood, hoping you don't end up with a potion on your tunic. Contraception in Rome was a mix of practical Know-how and wild guesses, driven by the need to manage family size in a crowded city. A mainstream fact grounds us. Medical texts by Soranus from the 2nd century CE describe methods like wool barriers soaked in olive oil or herbal pessaries to block conception. You're stirring a concoction of pomegranate seeds and rue, following a recipe that promises to calm the womb. You'd probably sneeze mid-mix, sending seeds flying, but Romans like Livia, our plebeian bride, relied on these to space out kids when grain was scarce. It's messy work, but it's about survival. Here's a quirky tidbit. One method involved wearing a weasel's liver tied to your thigh, believed to ward off pregnancy because weasels, apparently, were sneaky like that. Picture yourself wrestling with the knot, wondering if the smell's worth it. You'd laugh imagining explaining this to Marcus. Honey, it's for the weasel magic. Historians still argue whether these methods were effective or just folklore. Some say herbs like silphium, now extinct, had real contraceptive properties. Others think most were placebos with women banking on hope. You're not sure, but the jar's gritty texture makes you skeptical of its womb-calming powers. You glance at another recipe, this one a post-act rinse of vinegar and honey, which sounds like a salad dressing gone rogue. The humour hits when you imagine a Roman wife like Claudia from that patrician villa, daintily applying it while Lucius pretends not to notice. Women bore the brunt of contraception, though men sometimes used early condoms, linen or animal gut, for their own reasons. You recall those fennel vendors from Rome's streets peddling libido boosts. Here, the focus is slowing things down, a practical flip side. The taberna's owner, a gruff woman with stained hands, nods at your mix, muttering about Venus's approval, tying it to those temple rituals we saw. The lamp flickers, casting shadows on a small Priapus statue in the corner, his exaggerated grin a reminder of Rome's fertility obsession. You realize contraception wasn't just about avoiding kids, it was about choice, letting women like Livia steer their lives in a city that demanded heirs. The Tiber's hum grows softer, and you're starting to admire the ingenuity, even if the weasel liver's a hard pass. You set the jar down, wondering how many Roman women whispered these recipes in cramped insula, and what it meant to hold that kind of power in a world ruled by men and gods. You're drifting through a bustling Roman forum, the Tiber's muddy scent mingling with the tang of incense wafting from nearby altars. Marble statues loom over the crowd, merchants haggling, senators strutting, and priests in crisp togas, tossing grain to sacred flames. You're not here to buy olives or debate politics. You're meeting the divine patrons of fertility, the gods and goddesses who shaped Rome's obsession with reproduction. The city's pulse thrums under your sandals, and you're trying not to trip on a stray cobble while you navigate this pantheon, hoping you don't accidentally offend a deity with your sweaty, mortal vibes. Fertility was Rome's lifeline, tying sex to the empire's survival through crops, kids, and cosmic approval. A mainstream fact anchors us. By the 1st century BCE, the cult of Ceres, goddess of grain and motherhood, drew thousands to her April festival, the Cerealia, where rituals ensured bountiful harvests and healthy births. You're watching women offer spelt cakes to Ceres' altar, their faces earnest as they pray for strong sons or full fields. You'd probably drop your cake, earning a priestess's sigh. But these rites were vital. Fertility wasn't just personal, it was Rome's future. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Romans left phallic-shaped bread at altars to Priapus, the cheeky fertility god we met in that patrician bedroom, believing his enthusiasm would rub off. Picture yourself stifling a giggle as you place a doughy tribute, hoping no one notices your red face. You'd laugh, thinking it's like leaving a spicy cupcake for luck. Historians still argue whether these offerings were symbolic or tied to actual bedroom hopes. Some say they were metaphors for abundance. Others think they were desperate pleas for conception in a world of high infant mortality. You're not sure, but the bread's exaggerated shape suggests someone's hedging their bets. You move toward a smaller shrine to Bona Dea, the good goddess, whose women-only rites promise safe childbirth. Men were banned, and you're keeping your distance, catching only whispers of chants and the scent of myrrh. The humor hits when you imagine a curious guy like Gaius from our Love Curse tablet, sneaking a peek and getting chased off by an angry priestess. These gods weren't distant. Ceres, Priapus, Bona Dea, they lived in Rome's daily grind, from Livia's plebeian prayers to Claudia's elite offerings. You recall the Venus temple's wine pours. Here, the stakes feel higher, with every ritual a plea for life itself. The forum's noise fades as you linger by Ceres' statue, her stone eyes serene yet commanding. You realize these fertility gods weren't just about sex. They were about legacy, tying every Roman to the Tiber's endless flow. You're starting to feel their power, the way they shaped hopes in villas and insulae alike. The sun climbs higher, and you step back, wondering how these divine patrons steered Rome's bedrooms and what it meant to love under their watchful, eternal gaze. You're weaving through a crowded Roman market, the Tiber's fishy tang blending with the aroma of sizzling sausages and fresh rosemary bundles. Women in stolas barter for figs, their bronze pins glinting as they gesture with confidence, their voices cutting through the din. You're not here to haggle for dinner. You're uncovering the hidden power women wielded in Rome's game of love and sex, where influence often came from charm, strategy, and a well-timed glance. The city's pulse thrums underfoot, and you're trying not to trip over a stray amphora while you track these subtle queens of desire, hoping you don't look too obviously out of place. Roman women, especially among the elite, could sway hearts and households, even in a world ruled by men. A mainstream fact grounds us. By the 1st century BCE, laws like the Lex Oppia were repealed, letting wealthy women own property and manage dowries, giving them leverage in marriages and beyond. You're picturing a matron like Flavia, her gold, earrings catching the sun, negotiating with her husband over a lover's gift or a political favor. You'd probably fumble your own sales pitch, dropping figs in the dust, but Flavia's cool poise is magnetic. She's not just shopping, she's running the show. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some women wore perfume-soaked ribbons woven into their hair, a trick to signal availability or status, the scent wafting like a silent flirt. Imagine Flavia adjusting hers, catching a suitor's eye with a whiff of rose and myrrh. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like spritzing perfume before a date, but with better branding. Historians still argue whether this power was real or an illusion. Some say women's economic rights gave them bedroom clout. Others think social norms kept them tethered, their influence limited to whispers. You're not sure, but Flavia's sharp glance at a passing senator suggests she's got more sway than the law books admit. You pause by a stall selling Venus amulets, where a vendor, a wiry woman with a sly grin, teases a shy bride about keeping her man happy. The humor hits when the bride blushes, fumbling her coins, and you're reminded of Livia, our plebeian wife, who held her own with Marcus. Women like Flavia, or the vendor, weren't just pawns. They were advisors, matchmakers, even poets, shaping Rome's romantic currents. You recall those temple rituals to Venus, where women poured wine. Here, that divine favor feels practical, wielded in markets and bedrooms. You notice a graffito nearby, praising a woman's eyes like stars. and wonder if Flavia inspired it. The market's chaos softens as you step back, the Tiber's glint catching your eye. You realize women's power wasn't loud, it was woven into Rome's fabric, from Claudia's patrician bed to this vendor's quick wit. You're starting to admire their finesse, the way they bent rules with a smile. The crowd thins, and you linger, wondering how Flavia plays her cards in this noisy, sunlit world, and what it takes to rule love's game when the dice are stacked against you. You're lounging in the shade of a bustling Roman workshop, the Tiber's damp scent mixing with the tang of sweat and molten bronze. Around you, men, smiths, carters, even a sunburned farmer, haul crates or barter for tools, their voices a steady drone over the clang of hammers. You're not here to buy a new lamp. You're peeling back the layers of what Rome expected from men in the arena of love and sex, where social duties weighed heavier than a legionary's armor. The city's pulse thrums through the dust, and you're trying not to knock over a stack of amphorae while you unravel the pressures shaping these guys, hoping you don't get roped into lifting something heavy. Roman men were expected to be pillars of strength in the forum and the bedroom, their virility tied to family and state. A mainstream fact grounds us. By the 1st century BCE, laws under Augustus penalized bachelors and childless husbands, pushing men to marry and sire citizens for Rome's glory. You're picturing a tanner like Quintus, his hands rough from leatherwork, sweating under the expectation to wed and produce heirs. You'd probably fumble a pep talk, tripping over a stray hide, but Quintus feels the heat. Failure to perform could cost him status or tax breaks. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some men carried tiny Priapus charms like the one we saw in Claudia's villa, tucked into their tunics for a boost of confidence. Imagine Quintus clutching one, praying it works before a big night, only to drop it in the street. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like misplacing a lucky sock, but these talismans were serious, a nod to the fertility god's oversized reputation. Historians still argue whether this pressure crushed men or just made them practical. Some say charms were psychological props. Others think they reveal anxiety in a society obsessed with masculine prowess. You're not sure, but Quintus is quick. Glance at his belt suggests he's not taking chances. You watch a young man, maybe a clerk, flirt with a girl by a water fountain. His boasts about his olive press, louder than necessary. The humor hits when she yawns, clearly unimpressed, and you're reminded of Gaius's lovesick curse tablet. Men had to sell themselves, often with gifts or wit. The expectations were clear: initiate romance, provide for the family, and keep the lineage going, like Marcus with Livia's bread vow marriage. You notice a small Venus shrine in the workshop's corner, its flowers wilted but present, a reminder of the goddess's role in every man's game. From those temple rituals to daily life, men could stray, mistresses were winked at, but failing to secure a wife or son drew sharper judgment. The workshop's noise dips as the sun climbs, and you realize these duties weren't just personal. They anchored Rome's social order, tying men to the Tiber's endless flow. You're starting to feel Quintus's burden, the way love was less about passion and more about proving his worth. The air grows still, save for a hammer's clang, and you lean back, wondering how he balances desire with duty, and what it takes to be a man when Rome's eyes are always watching. You're swept into the chaos of a Roman festival, the night air thick with the scent of spilled wine, roasted boar, and the sharp tang of pine torches flaring along the Tiber's banks. Drums pound, flutes wail, and revelers in loose tunics swirl through the streets, their laughter drowning out the city's usual hum. You're not just a bystander, you're joining the bacchanalian revels, wild celebrations of Bacchus, the god of wine and ecstasy, where desire runs free and Rome's rules bend under the moonlight. You're trying to keep your footing on the slick cobbles, clutching a clay cup of wine and hoping you don't trip into a pile of garlands, because this party's about to get out of hand. The Bacchanalia were Rome's most infamous festivals, blending devotion with debauchery in a way that made senators nervous. A mainstream fact grounds us. In 186 BCE, the Senate cracked down on these rites, citing orgies and conspiracies, as recorded by historian Livy, though the festivals continued in secret. You're dodging a group of dancers, their ivy crowns slipping as they spin, their movements fueled by Bacchus's divine madness. You'd probably spill your wine trying to join in, earning a drunken cheer. But this chaos was sacred. Sex and revelry honored the god, blurring lines between mortal and divine pleasure. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some revelers wore leopard skin cloaks mimicking Bacchus's mythical entourage, believing the wild vibe boosted their allure. Picture yourself draped in one, feeling ridiculous until someone winks. You'd laugh, thinking it's like wearing a costume to a club, but twice as sweaty. Historians still argue whether the Bacchanalia were truly scandalous or exaggerated by paranoid elites. Some say they were liberating, letting folks like Livia and Marcus cut loose. Others think the Senate hyped the orgy angle to control rowdy plebs. You're not sure, but the way that couple over there's tangled in a corner suggests the rumors weren't all hot air. You weave through the crowd, past a makeshift altar where a priest pours wine over a Priapus statue. Yep, that oversized god again, grinning like he owns the night. The humor hits when a tipsy reveler tries to mimic the statue's pose, nearly toppling into the Tiber. These festivals let Romans shed their roles, senator, slave, wife, for a night of raw desire, much like those Venus rituals but with less restraint. You recall Flavia's market confidence. Here, she'd be a queen, her perfume ribbons drawing a swarm. Men and women alike chant Bacchus's name, their voices roar, and you feel the pull, like the wines tugging at your own inhibitions. The torches dim, and the Tiber's glint catches your eye, its current steady despite the frenzy. You realize these revels weren't just about sex. They were about freedom, a chance to taste the divine in a city of laws. You're starting to feel the night's wild pulse, the way it let Romans chase love without judgment. The drums fade, and you linger, wine cup empty, wondering what other secrets Bacchus's followers hid, and how this chaos fueled Rome's heart under the stars. You're slinking through Rome's moonlit alleys, the Tiber's dank scent clinging to the air, mixed with the faint whiff of olive oil lamps flickering behind shuttered windows. The cobblestones are slick under your sandals, and every shadow makes you flinch, as if a night watchman might catch you mid-step. You're not just wandering, you're dodging the legal risks of adultery, where forbidden love in ancient Rome could land you in more trouble than a bad batch of garum. The city's pulse feels like a held breath, and you're trying not to trip over a stray cat while you navigate this dangerous game, hoping you don't end up as tomorrow's gossip. Adultery was a high-stakes offense in Rome, especially after the empire tightened its moral leash. A mainstream fact anchors us. Augustus's Lex Julia de Adulteris, enacted in 18 BCE, made adultery a public crime, with penalties like exile or property loss, particularly for women caught straying. You're picturing a merchant like Sextus, heart racing as he sneaks to meet his lover, a married woman named Amelia. You'd probably knock over a clay pot trying to follow, blowing his cover, but the stakes are real. Getting caught could mean losing everything, from status to citizenship. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some lovers used coded messages like a sprig of myrtle left on a doorstep to signal a rendezvous without tipping off nosy neighbors. Imagine Sextus fumbling the sprig, dropping it in the wrong doorway, and sparking a comedy of errors. You chuckle, thinking it's like texting the wrong group chat, but with exile on the line. Historians still argue whether these laws were strictly enforced or mostly for show. Some say elites dodged punishment with bribes or connections. Others point to court records of banished women, suggesting the axe fell hard. You're not sure, but Sextus' quick glances scream he's not banking on mercy. You pause by a darkened insula, catching a whisper from a balcony. Amelia, maybe, arguing with Sextus about their next move. The humor hits when you imagine their panic if a dog barks, turning their secret tryst into a neighborhood spectacle. Adultery wasn't just a personal slip. It threatened family honor and inheritance, especially for patricians like Claudia, whose villa we peeked into. Men faced lighter consequences. Quintus, our tanner, might pay a fine, but women risked disgrace or worse. You recall the Bacchanalia's wild freedom. Here, that passion comes with chains, watched by Venus's judgmental gaze from her temple. The alley grows quieter, the Tiber's flow, a steady reminder of Rome's unforgiving order. You realize adultery was a crack in the empire's facade where love defied the rules meant to bind it. You're starting to feel Sextus's thrill and fear, the way desire pushed him past reason. The stars peer down, cold and distant, and you slip away, wondering how many lovers braved these shadows and what price they paid for a stolen kiss in Rome's watchful night. You're lingering in the cool shade of a Roman bathhouse, steam curling around you like a lover's whisper, the air heavy with the scent of olive oil and damp mosaic tiles. The hum of quiet conversations mixes with the splash of water, and you're catching glimpses of men lounging, their tunics discarded, eyes lingering a bit too long on each other. You're not here to soak, you're tracing the shadows of same-sex bonds in ancient Rome, loves that flourished despite the empire's rigid norms. The Tiber's pulse feels distant, and you're trying not to slip on the slick floor while you piece together these hidden stories, hoping you don't draw too many curious stares. Rome's attitude towards same-sex relationships was complex, shaped by power and status more than morality. A mainstream fact grounds us. Literary sources from the 1st century CE, like Petronius's Satyricon, depict elite men openly pursuing male lovers, often younger or lower status partners, as a sign of sophistication. You're imagining a poet like Titus, his stylus poised, exchanging flirtatious verses with a young freedman in this steamy haze. You'd probably drop your towel trying to eavesdrop, blushing at their boldness, but such bonds were common, especially among the cultured upper class, as long as roles stayed clear: active versus passive, elite versus subordinate. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some men gifted their lovers engraved bronze mirrors, etched with cupids or coy inscriptions, a subtle way to say, "You're mine." Picture Titus slipping one to his beloved only for it to clatter on the tiles, drawing chuckles. You'd laugh thinking it's like sliding a flirty note in class, but shinier. Historians still argue whether these relationships were accepted or quietly judged. Some say they were a flex of power, with little stigma for the dominant partner. Others point to laws like the Lex Scantinia, which vaguely penalized unnatural acts, suggesting limits. You're not sure, but Titus's easy smile hints he's not sweating the legal fine print. You notice a group of men nearby, their laughter soft but intimate, sharing wine from a single cup. The humor hits when one spills it, blaming the steam, and you're reminded of Gaius's love-cursed tablet. Passion, it seems, spares no one. These bonds weren't flaunted like bacchanalian flings, but they thrived in bathhouses, symposiums, or private villas, away from the forum's glare. You recall the Venus temple's rituals, their focus on traditional love. Here, desire bends those rules, finding space in Rome's margins. Women, too, had such loves, though rarer in records. Poet Sappho's influence lingered in whispered odes among elite ladies. The steam thickens, and you realize these bonds were Rome's quiet rebellion, loves that carved out room in a world of duty and airs. You're starting to feel the courage it took, like Titus risking gossip for a stolen glance. The bathhouse's warmth wraps around you, and you step back, wondering how many such stories hid in plain sight, and what it meant to love freely when Rome's eyes were never fully closed. You're navigating the seedy underbelly of Rome's Subura district, where the Tiber's fishy stench mixes with the tang of cheap perfume and sizzling street meat. Narrow alleys pulse with life, drunks stagger, hawkers shout, and women in gaudy tunics lean against doorways, their laughter sharp as they beckon passers-by. You're not here for a late-night snack. You're stepping into the bustling world of prostitution, Rome's open secret where pleasure was a trade as common as bread. The city's heartbeat thuds through the cobblestones, and you're trying not to trip over a broken amphora while you explore this gritty marketplace of desire, hoping you don't get mistaken for a customer. Prostitution was woven into Rome's fabric, legal and taxed, thriving in taverns, brothels, and even under temple arches. A mainstream fact grounds us. Records from the 1st century CE show lupe, she-wolves, as prostitutes were called, registered with the state, paying fees to work in designated areas like the Subura or near the Circus Maximus. You're picturing a woman like Drusilla, her hair dyed saffron, negotiating with a sailor for a quick coin. You'd probably fumble your own denarius trying to ask for directions, earning her teasing smirk, but she's a businesswoman, navigating Rome's lust with sharp wit and sharper boundaries. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some lupi wore sandals with soles carved to leave "Follow me" prints in the dust, a cheeky ad for their services. Imagine Drusilla strutting, her trail, luring clients like a breadcrumb path. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like a flirty billboard, but twice as bold. Historians still argue whether prostitution offered women freedom or trapped them. Some say lupe like Drusilla could earn enough to buy property. Others point to texts showing social scorn, with elite women like Flavia sneering at their low trade. You're not sure, but Drusilla's confident toss of her head suggests she's pocketing coins and pride. You pause by a cramped brothel, its walls painted with crude scenes echoing Pompeii's frescoes, minus the artistry. The humor hits when you overhear a client haggle, only for Drusilla to quip, "He's cheaper than yesterday's fish." Her work isn't just physical, it's performance, charm, even counseling for lonely men. You recall the Bacchanalia's wild nights. Here, desire's a transaction, but no less human. Some lupe offered prayers to Venus, like those temple rituals, seeking protection or luck. You notice a small Priapus charm around Drusilla's neck, a nod to fertility's flip side, pleasure without airs, a service Rome needed but judged. The Subura's din softens as you slip back into an alley, the Tiber's glint barely visible. You realize prostitution wasn't just commerce, it was a mirror of Rome's contradictions, where desire met duty and women like Drusilla carved power from the margins. You're starting to admire her hustle, the way she thrives in this chaotic, torchlit world. The night grows still, and you linger, wondering what dreams she chases beyond the next coin and how she navigates love in a city that buys it by the hour. You're perched on a stone bench in a bustling Roman atrium, the Tiber's faint ripple blending with the chatter of women weaving wool and the clink of loom weights. Sunlight streams through the open roof, warming your shoulders, and you're catching snippets of a mother advising her daughter on her upcoming betrothal. You're not here to admire the tapestries. You're weighing the social value of virginity in ancient Rome, a concept tied less to morality and more to family honor and practical alliances. The city's pulse hums through the walls, and you're trying not to knock over a spindle while you unravel this delicate topic, hoping you don't look too awkward, eavesdropping. Virginity in Rome was a prized asset, especially for women, but it wasn't the sacred obsession of later eras, it was a means to an end. A mainstream fact grounds us. By the 1st century BCE, Roman marriage laws, like those under Augustus, favored virgin brides for elite unions, ensuring clear paternity for inheritance and political ties, as seen in betrothals like Claudia's to Lucius. You're picturing a girl like Cornelia, nervous but poised, her family boasting her untouched status to secure a wealthy groom. You'd probably fumble a reassuring word, tripping over Latin pleasantries, but her virginity is currency, not a halo, in this game of dynasties. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some brides wore a white tunica recta with a flame-colored veil. The flammeum, to signal purity, knotted with a belt only the groom could untie, a symbolic no trespassing sign. Imagine Cornelia adjusting the knot, praying it doesn't snag. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like a wedding dress with a built-in security code. Historians still argue whether virginity was strictly enforced or more of a social flex. Some say it mattered most for patricians. Others point to texts suggesting plebeian girls like Livia faced less scrutiny as long as they married young. You're not sure, but Cornelia's tight smile suggests she feels the weight of expectation. You notice the mother weaving a red thread into the cloth, maybe a nod to Venus, whose temple rituals we saw celebrated love's divine spark. Virginity's value was practical, ensuring heirs without drama, but it wasn't flaunted publicly. The humor hits when you overhear the mother whisper about keeping suitors guessing, like a strategic game of hide-and-seek. Unlike the Bacchanalia's wild freedom or Drusilla's bold trade, virginity tied girls to family honor, a step toward marriage's duties. Men, like Quintus, weren't held to the same standard, double standards as old as Rome. You spot a small Venus statuette on a shelf, a reminder of the goddess's role in guiding Cornelia to her wedding night. The atrium's bustle slows as the women pause to sip watered wine, and you realize virginity was less about virtue and more about leverage, a key to Rome's social machinery. You're starting to see Cornelia not as a symbol, but as a girl balancing hope and pressure, her future hinging on a single knot. The Tiber's glow filters through the roof, and you linger, wondering how she'll navigate her betrothal, and what it means to carry a city's expectations in a flame-colored veil. You're standing in a small, stuffy room off a Roman villa's courtyard, the Tiber's faint dampness seeping through the walls, mingling with the heavy scent of myrrh and sweat-soaked linen. A woman's labored breathing fills the air, punctuated by the soft chants of midwives and the clink of bronze tools on a clay tray. You're not just a guest, you're witnessing the risky, sacred rituals of childbirth in ancient Rome, where sex's ultimate purpose meets divine and human stakes. The city's pulse feels far away, and you're trying not to bump into a low stool while you take in this intense moment, hoping you don't faint at the sight of a birthing chair. Childbirth was both a triumph and a gamble in Rome, tying families to the gods and the empire's future. A mainstream fact grounds us. Medical texts by Galen from the 2nd century CE describe birthing practices including prayers to Juno Lucina, goddess of childbirth, and the use of olive oil massages to ease delivery. You're watching a midwife, her hands steady, rub oil on the mother's belly, murmuring to Juno as she adjusts a wooden birthing chair. You'd probably spill the oil, earning a sharp look, but this ritual is critical. Every birth was a roll of the dice, with high risks for mother and child. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some midwives placed a laurel leaf under the chair, believing its scent warded off evil spirits and calmed the mother's pain. Picture yourself tucking one in place, only to have it flutter away uselessly. You'd chuckle, imagining it's like spritzing aromatherapy in a crisis, but Romans took it seriously, blending faith with medicine. Historians still argue whether these rituals were effective or purely spiritual. Some say herbs like fennel seen in those market stalls eased labor. Others think prayers and laurels were more about hope than results. You're not sure, but the mother's grip on a Juno amulet suggests she's clinging to both. You notice women gathered around, aunts and neighbors, their voices low as they sing a hymn to Bonadea, the goddess we met at that women-only shrine. The humor hits when one auntie jokes about the baby inheriting grandpa's big ears, lightening the tension for a moment. Rituals frame this birth. The midwife burns sage, and a cord is tied around the mother's wrist, echoing Venus's protective embrace from her temple rites. If it's a boy, he'll get a Priapus charm like Quintus's lucky talisman. A girl, a crescent moon pendant for Juno. You recall Drusilla's world, where sex was pleasure. Here, it's legacy. Every contraction a step toward Rome's next citizen. The room feels smaller as the labor peaks, the Tiber's hum drowned by the mother's resolve. You realize childbirth was Rome's crucible, where women like Flavia or Livia became creators, their pain a bridge to eternity. You're starting to feel the awe of this moment, the way it binds love, duty, and survival. The midwife's chant rises, urging strength, and you step back, humbled by the power here, wondering how many lives began in such fragile, sacred spaces and what it costs to bring Rome's future into the world. You're seated in a cramped office near Rome's Forum, the Tiber's muddy scent drifting through a high window, mixing with the musty tang of papyrus scrolls and spilled ink. A scribe scratches away, his reed pen flicking like a nervous heartbeat, while a couple argues in hushed, heated tones across the desk. You're not here to file a grain tax. You're untangling the public drama of divorce in ancient Rome, where love's end was less a private tearjerker and more a legal spectacle with togas flying. The city's pulse thrums outside, and you're trying not to knock over a wax tablet while you follow the unraveling of vows, hoping you don't get caught in the crossfire of their glares. Divorce in Rome was straightforward but never quiet, with laws making breakups a matter of public record and gossip. A mainstream fact grounds us. By the 1st century BCE, Roman law allowed either spouse to initiate divorce through a simple declaration, often with a written repudium, as seen in legal texts like Cicero's letters. You're picturing a woman, like Sabina, a weaver with a sharp tongue, handing her husband Gaius, not our lovesick poet, her notice to split, demanding her dowry back. You'd probably fumble the scroll trying to pass it, earning a scowl, but Sabina's not here to play. Divorce meant reclaiming her stake in a world that favored men. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some divorcing couples performed a symbolic breaking of the belt, untying the bride's wedding knot like Cornelia's flammeum to signal the end. Imagine Sabina yanking it apart with flair while Gaius mutters about her cooking. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like smashing a wedding cake. but with less frosting. Historians still argue whether divorce empowered women or left them vulnerable. Some say retaining dowries gave leverage, like Flavia's market clout. Others note social stigma hit women harder, with men like Quintus remarrying faster. You're not sure, but Sabina's steely eyes suggest she's ready to face the whispers. You glance at the repudium on the desk, its ink listing who keeps the villa, the slaves, and that one prized mule. The humor hits when you spot a line about splitting a set of bronze cups, petty even in Rome's grandeur. Divorce wasn't just paperwork, it reshaped families, alliances, and reputations, especially for elites like Claudia, whose villa we peeked into. Plebeians like Marcus and Livia faced simpler splits but no less drama. Neighbors, like those Subura gossips, loved a good breakup tale. You recall the Bacchanalia's wild freedom. Here, love's end is bound by law, not wine. The scribe's pen pauses and you notice a small Venus statuette, maybe a wry nod to happier days. The office grows stuffy, the Tibers hum a steady undercurrent, and you realize divorce wasn't just a split, it was a chance to rewrite Rome's social script for better or worse. You're starting to admire Sabina's nerve, her refusal to stay in a broken vow. The argument softens and you lean back, wondering how she'll rebuild in this noisy, judgmental city, and what it takes to walk away when love's promise fades like ink on papyrus. You're standing in the opulent atrium of a senatorial villa. The Tiber's faint ripple barely audible through walls of imported marble and flickering bronze lamps. Mosaics of gods and heroes gleam underfoot, and the air carries the scent of lavender oil and freshly pressed wool. You're not here to admire the wealth, you're confronting the unsettling echoes of incest among Rome's elite, where mythic tales and political strategy blurred family lines in ways that feel like a scroll you'd rather not unroll. The city's pulse hums distantly, and you're trying not to trip on a silk rug while you navigate this taboo terrain, hoping you don't look as uneasy as you feel. Incest in Rome wasn't common but carried weight in elite circles, often tied to power rather than passion. A mainstream fact grounds us. By the 1st century CE, the Julio-Claudian dynasty, as noted by historians like Suetonius, saw marriages between close relatives, like Agrippina the Younger's union with her uncle Claudius, to consolidate imperial bloodlines. You're picturing a young noble, let's call her Livia Minor, betrothed to her cousin to seal a political pact. You'd probably fumble a polite bow, feeling the room's tension, but this wasn't about love, it was about keeping power in the family, echoing myths of Jupiter and Juno's sibling bond. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some elite brides wore rings engraved with twin serpents, symbolizing eternal unity, even in cousin marriages, a nod to divine precedent. Imagine Livia Minor slipping, one on, her smile forced, as guests whisper. You chuckle nervously, thinking it's like a wedding band with too much baggage. Historians still argue whether these unions were practical or scandalous. Some say they mimicked mythic gods, lending legitimacy. Others point to public unease, with gossips like those in the Subura calling them unnatural. You're not sure, but the villa's heavy silence suggests not everyone's cheering this match. You notice a fresco of Venus and Mars, their embrace, a stark contrast to the cold strategy here, unlike the warm passion in Pompey's art. The humor hits when you spot a tiny Cupid in the corner, looking bored, as if even he's over this dynastic drama. These marriages, like Claudius, often aim to produce heirs who'd unify rival factions, much like Lucius and Claudia's patrician duties. But they isolated families, setting them apart from plebeians like Marcus and Livia, whose bread vows were simpler. You recall the Bacchanalia's wild freedom. Here, loves constrained by bloodlines, watched by Venus's marble eyes from her temple rituals. The atrium's glow dims as you step toward a balcony. The Tiber's glint, a faint reminder of Rome's broader world. You realize incest was less about desire and more about control, a gilded cage for elites like Livia Minor. You're starting to feel the chill of their choices, the way myth and power warped human bonds. The villa grows quiet, save for a slave's. Soft footsteps and you slip away, wondering how these families balanced love and ambition and what it cost to marry a myth in Rome's unforgiving spotlight. You're strolling through Rome's forum, the Tiber's briny scent weaving through the bustle of merchants hawking silks and philosophers debating under marble colonnades. The sun glints off polished bronze statues, and you're dodging toga-clad crowds, their oiled skin and laurel-wreathed hair catching every eye. You're not here to buy a new belt. You're diving into Rome's ideals of beauty, where physical allure was a crafted art, signaling status, desire, and divine favor. The city's pulse thrums under your sandals, and you're trying not to trip on a loose paving stone while you decode what made Romans swoon, hoping you don't look like you just rolled out of an insula. Beauty in Rome was a public performance, as much about power as attraction. A mainstream fact grounds us. Frescoes and statues from the 1st century CE, like those in Pompeii, show idealized Romans, men with chiseled jaws and broad shoulders, women with curved hips and intricate hairstyles as models of divine harmony. You're eyeing a woman like Valeria, her stola draped to accentuate her waist, her hair piled high with curls that must have taken hours. You'd probably tangle your own tunic trying to mimic her poise, earning a chuckle, but her look screams Venus's approval, tying her to the goddess's temple rituals we saw. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans used lead-based makeup, called cerussa, to whiten skin, believing a pale face signaled elite leisure, no sunburn for patricians. Picture Valeria dabbing it on, ignoring the toxic sting, while you wince at the thought. You'd laugh imagining it's like slathering on sunscreen that bites back. Historians still argue whether beauty was about seduction or social rank. Some say it lured lovers like Flavia's market ribbons. Others think it marked class, separating elites like Claudia from plebs like Livia. You're not sure, but Valeria's confident stride suggests she's wielding both. You pause by a barber's stall where men like Quintus get their beards trimmed. To mimic statues of Apollo, clean-shaven was the trend, a nod to youthful gods. The humor hits when a customer yelps as the razor nicks, muttering about divine perfection gone wrong. Women, too, faced pressure. Valeria's coal-lined eyes and saffron-dyed hair echo Pompeii's frescoes, but plebeian women used cheaper ochre, like Livia might have. Beauty wasn't just skin-deep. It fought Rome's heat and grime with oils to keep skin soft and wigs for those not blessed with Valeria's locks. You recall Drusilla's Subura swagger. Her dyed hair was a budget version of this elite game. The forum's din softens as you near a fountain, its water cool against your fingers. You realize beauty was Rome's currency, spent in glances and alliances, from bacchanalian dances to marriage beds. You're starting to admire the effort, the way every curl and gleam was a step in love's dance. The Tiber's glow catches your eye and you linger, wondering how Valeria keeps her makeup intact in this chaos, and what it takes to shine when Rome's sun and scrutiny never relent. You're tucked into a perfumer's tiny shop off a Roman side street, the Tiber's damp musk barely cutting through the dizzying blend of rose, saffron, and something earthy simmering in a clay pot. shelves brim with alabaster vials and wax-sealed jars, their labels smudged from eager hands. You're not here to freshen up. You're diving into the seductive craft of Roman perfume, where a single whiff could spark desire or seal a lover's fate. The city's pulse thrums beyond the door, and you're trying not to knock over a delicate glass bottle while you explore this fragrant sorcery, hoping you don't sneeze and ruin the mood. Perfume in Rome was more than a luxury. It was a weapon, turning heads and bending hearts in a city obsessed with allure. A mainstream fact grounds us. Trade records from the 1st century CE show Rome importing costly scents like myrrh from Arabia and spikenard from India, used by elites like Valeria to enhance their beauty at banquets or temples. You're picturing her dabbing a blend behind her ears, each drop worth a laborer's weekly wage. You'd probably spill the vial, leaving you smelling like a spice market disaster, but Valeria's precision makes it an art, echoing Venus's divine charm from her temple rituals. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some perfumes were mixed with powdered oyster shells believed to channel Venus's seaborne power and boost your romantic pull. Imagine Valeria stirring in the gritty bits, unfazed while you gag at the fishy undertone. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like blending a love potion with beach sand, but Romans swore by it. Historians still argue whether these scents were for seduction or status. Some say they lured lovers like Flavia's market ribbons. Others think they marked wealth, setting patricians apart from plebs like Livia, who used cheaper rosewater. You're not sure, but Valeria's sly smile as she tests a sample suggests she's hunting hearts, not just clout. You pick up a small bottle, its contents warm and amber, labeled Venus Breath. The perfumer, a wiry man with stained fingers, boasts it's perfect for festival nights, like the Bacchanalia's wild dances. You try a dab, feeling briefly like a Roman flirt until you overdo it, reeking like a temple altar. The humor hits. When the perfumer deadpans, subtlety is key, as if you've insulted his craft. Men used scents too. Quintus might have worn cedar oil to match his Apollo-esque shave, competing with Valeria's rose. You recall Drusilla's Subura swagger. Her cheap violet oil was a gritty echo of this elite game, but no less potent. The shop's glow dims as the lamp flickers, and you realize perfume was Rome's spell, a way to weave desire into the air itself. The Tiber's steady hum sneaks through the walls, and you're starting to admire Valeria's mastery, her scent a silent command in Rome's noisy chaos. You set the bottle down, wondering if one whiff could sway a lover like Gaius, or if it's just another layer in the city's endless dance of attraction, where every note carries a promise under the Roman sun. You're weaving through a torchlit Roman banquet, the Tiber's faint ripple drowned by the clink of bronze goblets and the hum of tipsy laughter. Tables groan under platters of dormice and peacock, and guests recline on cushions, their togas and stolas artfully draped to catch wandering eyes. You're not here to snag a second helping, you're decoding the flirty signals of Roman clothing, where every fold, pin, and flash of skin sends a message about availability or restraint. The city's pulse thrums through the room, and you're trying not to trip over a trailing hem while you spot who's signaling what, hoping you don't end up with wine on your tunic. Clothing in Rome was a billboard for desire, balancing modesty with calculated allure in a society obsessed with appearances. A mainstream fact grounds us. By the 1st century CE, literary sources like Ovid's Ars Amatoria describe women's stolas and men's togas as tools of seduction, with loose folds or strategic pins hinting at romantic openness. You're watching A woman like Alia, her stola pinned low to bare one shoulder, a subtle look but don't touch vibe. You'd probably tangle your own toga trying to copy her nonchalance, earning a giggle, but her style's deliberate, echoing Valeria's market elegance and Venus's temple glow. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some women tied their stolas with a loose, Herculean knot, a bow that invited a lover to tug it undone, signaling they were game. Picture Alia adjusting hers, catching a senator's eye, while you fumble your own knot into a mess. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like wearing a swipe right badge, but twice as bold. Historians still argue whether these signals were universal or elite-specific. Some say plebeians like Livia used simpler tunics with similar tricks. Others think only patricians like Flavia played this sartorial game. You're not sure, but Alia's sly glance suggests she's rewriting the rules tonight. You notice a man across the room, his toga draped, to show a toned arm, a nod to Apollo's statuesque ideal we saw in the forum. The humor hits when a younger guest, overeager, lets his toga slip too far, drawing snickers. He's no Quintus with his cedar-oiled poise. Clothing wasn't just flirtation. It marked status. Widows wore dark pallas, signaling retreat, while festival-goers like those Bacchanalia revelers chose vibrant dyes to stand out. You recall Drusilla's Subura sandals, their follow-me soles, a grittier version of Alia's knot, but both played the game of desire. Even men's cloaks pinned just so could hint at availability, though married men like Marcus kept theirs formal to match Livia's vows. The banquet's warmth wraps around you, and you realize clothing was Rome's silent language, speaking of love, power, and defiance in every thread. You're starting to admire Alia's precision, the way her stola's fold turns heads without a word. The Tiber's glow flickers beyond a window, and you linger, wondering how her Herculean knot will shift the night's story, and what your own clumsy tunic might say in this glittering, judgmental crowd of Roman romantics. You're swaying in a lamp-lit Roman villa's courtyard, the Tiber's soft gurgle blending with the trill of a lyre and the rhythmic tap of tambourines. The air is warm, heavy with the scent of mulled wine and olive oil, as guests in flowing tunics move together under strings of flickering lanterns. You're not just a wallflower, you're caught in the dance of passion, where Romans used movement to ignite romantic sparks, weaving desire into every step and spin. Your sandals scuff the mosaic floor, and you're trying to follow the beat, without flailing like a startled goose, hoping you don't crash into a garland-draped column. Dance in Rome was a seductive art, turning banquets and festivals into stages for flirtation. A mainstream fact grounds us. Literary sources from the 1st century CE, like Juvenal's satires, describe dancers at elite gatherings performing provocative moves inspired by Venus or Bacchus, often to woo or impress. You're watching a dancer, like Licinia, her stola swirling as her hips trace slow, deliberate arcs, her eyes locked on a smitten guest. You'd probably trip mid-step, trying to mimic her, earning a chuckle, but her dance is a spell, echoing the Bacchanalia's wild energy we felt under torchlight. It's not just pretty, it's power. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some dancers tossed scented ribbons, like Flavia's market perfume trick, to chosen partners, a flirty invite to join the floor. Picture Licinia lobbing one, only for it to land in your lap by mistake. You'd blush, fumbling to toss it back like a hot coal. You'd laugh, thinking it's like getting picked in a game you don't know the rules to. Historians still argue whether these dances were choreographed displays or spontaneous seduction. Some say they followed ritual scripts like Venus, temple rites. Others think dancers like Licinia improvised to steal hearts. You're not sure, but her confident twirl suggests she's writing her own rules. You notice the crowd leaning closer, their wine cups forgotten, as Licinia's movements weave a story, arms arcing like the Tiber's curves, feet teasing the tiles. The humor hits when a tipsy guest tries to join, his clumsy shuffle nearly toppling a lamp, reminding you of that Bacchanalia reveler's Priapus pose fail. Men danced too, like Quintus with his Apollo-esque poise, their steps bolder, echoing Aelia's Herculean knot from the banquet. You recall Pompeii's frescoes, their lovers frozen in motion. Here, that art comes alive, every sway a nod to Venus. Divine spark. Even plebeians like Livia might have danced at simpler feasts, her moves less polished, but no less potent. The lyre's notes soften, and Licinia pauses, her chest rising, a ribbon dangling from her wrist. You realize dance was Rome's heartbeat, a bridge between strangers and gods, like the rituals we saw for Ceres or Juno. The Tiber's glow shimmers beyond the courtyard, and you're starting to feel Licinia's magic, the way she turns a step into a story of desire. You're not ready to leave the rhythm, but the music fades and you linger, wondering what other sparks her dance might kindle and how Rome's lovers moved to love's unspoken song. You're leaning against a weathered wall in a Roman insula's courtyard, the Tiber's briny scent mingling with the aroma of fresh-baked bread and the chatter of neighbors scrubbing tunics in a shared basin. The evening sun casts long shadows, and you're catching whispers from a group of women, their voices low but sharp, dissecting someone's late-night rendezvous. You're not here to borrow a laundry pin, you're tuning into the biting world of Roman gossip, where rumors about love and sex could make or break reputations faster than a chariot race. The city's pulse hums through the cobblestones, and you're trying not to knock over a drying rack while you eavesdrop, hoping you don't get pegged as the nosy newcomer. Gossip in Rome was a social blade, shaping how people navigated desire in a city where everyone watched everyone else. A mainstream fact grounds us. Legal texts from the 1st century CE, like those in the Digest of Justinian, show slanderous rumors about infidelity could lead to lawsuits or public shaming, especially for women. You're picturing a seamstress, like Marcia, her needle pausing as whispers spread about her flirtation with a married baker. You'd probably drop your own thread trying to warn her, earning a raised eyebrow. But gossip wasn't just chatter. It could ruin marriages or scare off-suiters, like Sabina's divorce drama we overheard in the forum. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some gossips left coded graffiti, like a heart pierced with an arrow, near someone's door to hint at their loose ways. Imagine Marcia finding one, her cheeks burning as she scrubs it off. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like a shady social media tag, but with more permanent ink. Historians still argue whether gossip enforced social norms or just fueled envy. Some say it kept Romans in line, protecting families. Others think it unfairly targeted women like Flavia or Livia, amplifying small slips into scandals. You're not sure, but Marcia's tense glance at her neighbors suggests she's feeling the sting. You overhear a woman by the basin mock a man's clumsy festival dance, maybe that Bacchanalia wannabe who tripped over a lamp, linking it to his rumored lack of stamina. The humor hits when another chimes in, joking he's no Priapus, nodding to that cheeky god's oversized charms we've seen. Gossip wasn't just women's work. Men like Quintus spread tales too, perhaps to outshine rivals in love's game. You recall Drusilla's Subura hustle, where whispers could boost or tank her trade. Here, it's personal. Marcia's reputation hangs by a thread, and even Venus's temple prayers might not silence the tongues. You notice a small Cupid graffito nearby, as if love itself is mocking the rumors. The courtyard quiets as the women disperse, the Tiber's glow fading into dusk. You realize gossip was Rome's shadow, a force that policed desire while fanning its flames, shaping who dared love and who hid. You're starting to feel Marcia's frustration, the way whispers cling like damp wool. The insula grows still, save for a child's giggle, and you linger, wondering how many secrets fueled these tales, and whether truth mattered as much as the story Rome's tongues wove under the city's watchful stars. You're sprawled on a sun-warmed bench in a Roman insula's rooftop garden, the Tiber's fishy breeze cutting through the scent of potted thyme, and the laughter of kids tossing a leather ball nearby. The city's sprawl hums below, and you're watching a grizzled uncle spin tales to a gaggle of teens, their eyes wide, but giggles barely contained. You're not here to referee their game, you're uncovering how Roman youth learned about love, sex, and the messy art of growing up through whispers, myths, and awkward family chats. The city's pulse thrums through the tiles, and you're trying not to knock over a clay pot while you soak in these lessons, hoping you don't look like you're spying on a schoolyard. Rome didn't have sex ed classes, but kids were schooled in desire through stories and example, preparing them for roles as lovers and spouses. A mainstream fact grounds us. By the 1st century CE, elite boys, as noted by Quintilian, were taught rhetoric with love poetry like Ovid's, while girls learned domestic arts and marriage etiquette from mothers like Cornelia's veil-tying prep. You're picturing a boy like Publius, all acne and bravado, reciting steamy verses while his sister, Vibia, rolls her eyes, learning from her aunt how to charm a suitor. You'd probably butcher the Latin, tripping over Ovid's wit, but these lessons shaped Rome's next generation, from patricians to plebs like Livia's kin. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some boys got tiny Venus amulets at puberty, worn to boost their romantic luck, while girls received bronze mirrors to practice their alluring gaze. Imagine Publius fumbling his amulet, blushing as it dangles, while Vibia smirks into her mirror. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like getting a charm bracelet with a side of teen angst. Historians still argue whether these teachings empowered youth or boxed them into norms. Some say they gave kids tools to navigate love, like Flavia's market finesse. Others think they enforced rigid roles, especially for girls. You're not sure, but Vibia's sly grin suggests she's plotting her own path. You notice the uncle weave in a tale of Venus and Mars, like those frescoes in Pompeii, hinting at passion's rewards and risks. Maybe a nod to Marcia's gossip, woes. The humor hits when Publius interrupts, asking if Mars really scored, earning a swat and a laugh. Kids learned from life too. Watching Sabina's divorce drama or Drusilla's Subura swagger taught more than any poem. Boys like Publius might mimic Quintus's toga swagger, while girls copied Aelia's Herculean knot, practicing for banquets or Bacchanalia nights. You spot a faded graffito of a heart on a wall, maybe Publius's crush, tying their youth to Gaius's lovesick tablet. The rooftop grows quiet as the kids scatter, the Tiber's glint softening below. You realize these lessons weren't just about sex. They were Rome's blueprint, guiding young hearts to fit the city's rhythm. You're starting to admire Publius and Vibia's spark, their mix of nerves and defiance as they step into love's maze. The breeze hums and you linger, wondering what tales they'll tell their own kids, and how Rome's youth learned to chase desire under the empire's watchful sun. You're wandering through a sunlit Roman villa's peristyle, the Tiber's faint ripple blending with the trickle of a marble fountain, its basin carved with frolicking nymphs. The air carries the scent of blooming roses and polished stone, and you're pausing before a statue of a lover's embrace their marble limbs entwined with a tenderness that stops you cold. You're not just admiring art, you're studying the intimate glimpses in Roman sculptures, where private moments of desire are frozen for eternity. The city's pulse hums through the garden, and you're trying not to bump into a clay planter while you decode these silent stories, hoping you don't look like a gawking tourist. Roman sculpture wasn't shy about love, capturing its spark in ways that felt both divine and human. A mainstream fact grounds us. By the 1st century CE, statues in elite homes like those found in Herculaneum often depicted mythic couples, Venus and Mars, Bacchus and Ariadne, with subtle gestures hinting at sensuality, as seen in their clasped hands or tilted gazes. You're tracing the statue's curves, the woman's hand resting on her lover's chest, a pose echoing Pompeii's frescoes we saw. You'd probably blush, feeling like you've intruded, but Romans displayed these openly, celebrating desire as art, much like Venus's temple rituals. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some statues included tiny cupids at the base, mischievously tugging at the lover's drapery, as if to expose more than marble. Picture a chubby Cupid, grinning like he's up to no good, and you'd chuckle, thinking it's like a sculptor sneaking in a cheeky Easter egg. Historians still argue whether these works were decorative or instructive. Some say they set a romantic mood, like Licinia's banquet dance. Others think they taught young Romans, like Publius and Vibia, about love's ideals. You're not sure, but the Cupid's smirk suggests he's betting on both. You move to another sculpture, a nymph leaning into a satyr, their marble eyes locked in a way that feels too real for myth. The humor hits when you notice a bird's nest tucked into the satyr's curls, as if nature's claiming this passion for itself. These pieces weren't just elite flexes, they spoke to plebeians too, like Livia and Marcus, whose bread-vow marriage craved such tenderness. You recall Gaius's love-cursed tablet, his desperation carved in lead. Here, love's etched in stone, eternal yet fragile. The sculptures echo Aelia's Herculean knot, a crafted signal of desire, but grander, meant to outlast Rome's chatter, even Marcia's sharp gossip. The fountain's trickle softens, and you realize these statues were Rome's heartbeat, preserving love's fleeting moments against time's grind. The Tiber's glow shimmers beyond the garden, and you're starting to feel the artist's skill, chiseling not just bodies, but emotions that linger in Flavia's market glances or Drusilla's Subura swagger. You pause, hand grazing the marble, wondering what other loves these stones hold, and how they shaped Rome's dreamers, from bacchanalia dancers to quiet couples, under the empire's endless sun. You're perched on a low stool in a cluttered Roman apothecary's shop, the Tiber's briny scent sneaking through a cracked shutter, mingling with the sharp tang of crushed mint, and something faintly rancid bubbling in a bronze pot. Shelves, grown under jars of dried herbs, honey, and mysterious powders, their labels faded from sweaty hands. You're not here for a headache cure. You're exploring Rome's quirky medical fixes for romantic ailments, from heartsick pining to bedroomy mishaps. The city's pulse thrums beyond the door, and you're trying not to knock over a vial of murky liquid while you mix these odd remedies, hoping you don't end up smelling like a failed experiment. Romans treated love's woes with a blend of science, superstition, and sheer optimism, believing the body and heart were linked. A mainstream fact grounds us. Medical texts by Pliny the Elder from the 1st century CE recommend herbs like myrtle or rose for lovesickness, often mixed with wine to calm a racing heart. You're picturing a poet like Gaius, yes, our cursed tablet dreamer, slumped here, begging for a tonic to soothe his crush on Flavia. You'd probably spill the myrtle, earning the apothecary's glare, but these cures were serious, meant to steady the soul for Rome's relentless game of desire, like Aelia's banquet flirtations. Here's a quirky tidbit. One remedy for male weakness involved eating roasted sparrow tongues, believed to spark vigor, because sparrows were apparently love machines. Imagine Gaius chewing these tiny bits, grimacing at the texture, while you gag at the thought. You'd chuckle, picturing it like popping a dubious energy shot before a date. Historians still argue whether these treatments worked or were pure placebo. Some say herbs like fennel from those market stalls boosted circulation. Others think faith in Venus from her temple rituals was the real cure. You're not sure, but Gaius's hopeful fidgeting suggests he's betting on the sparrows. You pick up a clay jar labelled for Heartfire, a mix of rose petals and saffron to cool obsessive love, maybe for someone caught in Marcia's gossip web. The apothecary, a gruff woman with stained nails, mutters a charm as she grinds cloves, tying her work to Juno's childbirth blessings we saw. The humour hits when she warns you not to mix it with garum, as if you'd slather fish sauce on your crush. Women use tonics too, valerian for nerves before a wedding night, like Cornelia's veil-tying prep, or poppy for fertility, echoing Drusilla's Subura prayers. You notice a Priapus figurine on a shelf, that cheeky god winking at Quintus's bedroom hopes, a reminder of Rome's obsession with performance. The shop's lamplight flickers, casting shadows on a faded Venus graffito, and you realize these remedies were more than medicine. They were Rome's attempt to tame love's chaos, from Bacchanalia passions to Sabina's divorce scars. You're starting to admire the apothecary's craft, her mix of grit and belief, soothing hearts in a city that never sleeps. You set the jar down, the Tiber's hum a steady undertone, wondering if Gaius's sparrow tongues won Flavia's smile, and what it takes to heal a longing that no herb can touch. You're resting on a faded cushion in a quiet Roman taberna, the Tiber's gentle lapping mingling with the creak of wooden benches and the soft clink of clay cups. The air smells of stale wine and warm bread, and you're watching an elder, his face etched with lines like a well-worn scroll, share a story with a younger patron about a long-ago love. You're not here for the watered-down vintage. You're exploring how aging shaped desire in ancient Rome, where love didn't vanish with grey hairs but found new ways to flicker in the empire's twilight. The city's pulse hums faintly. Outside, and you're trying not to spill your drink while you soak in this softer side of romance, hoping you don't look too engrossed in their chat. Age in Rome didn't douse passion, though it shifted how love was lived, with elders valued. For wisdom over youthful spark, a mainstream fact grounds us. Funerary inscriptions from the 1st century CE, like those on Via Appia, often praise elderly couples for lifelong devotion, depicting them sharing wine or garlands, much like Pompeii's frescoes. You're picturing an old baker like Titus, his hands gnarled, teasing his wife Paula about her lopsided bread loaves. You'd probably fumble a compliment tripping over your Latin, but their easy banter echoes Marcus and Livia's plebeian vows, showing love's endurance beyond the Bacchanalia's wild nights. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some elders wore amulets of Venus, smaller than Publius's puberty charms, tucked under tunics to keep their romantic fire alive, believing her gaze defied time. Imagine Titus adjusting his, winking at Paula like they're still banquet sweethearts. You'd chuckle, thinking it's like popping an herbal supplement with a divine logo. Historians still argue whether aging dimmed sexual roles or deepened emotional bonds. Some say elders like Flavia focused on companionship. Others point to Pliny's letters praising his older wife's charm, suggesting desire lingered. You're not sure, but Titus's sly grin hints he's not ready to retire from love's game. You notice Paula nearby, her stola looser but pinned. With care, her hair streaked silver, but still scented with rosewater, like Valeria's elite blends. The humor hits when she scolds Titus for flirting with a barmaid, her mock outrage sparking laughter. Elders weren't sidelined. They advised, youth like Vibia's aunt on marriage, or mediated disputes like Sabina's divorce drama. Men, like Quintus, leaned on experience to charm, while women like Paula became matchmakers, their wisdom a quieter power than Drusilla's Subura hustle. You spot a faded Venus graffito on the wall, a nod to the goddess's role in every age, from temple rites to taberna tales. The taberna's glow dims as the sun sets, the Tiber's rhythm a soothing undertone. You realize aging in Rome didn't end desire, it enriched it, weaving love into stories that outlasted youth's heat, like those marble lovers we saw. You're starting to feel Titus and Paula's strength, their ability to hold romance through time's wear, much like Gaius's lovesick hopes. The room grows still, save for a cup's clink, and you linger, wondering how they kept their spark alive, and what it means to love when Rome's days pile like stones along the river's endless flow. You're perched on a splintery bench in a bustling Roman port tavern, the Tiber's briny tang thick in the air, mingling with the stench of fish guts and the sharp bite of spilled Falernian wine. The crowd's a mosaic: Roman dockworkers, Egyptian traders, grizzled Parthian caravanners swapping tales over clay cups, their accents clashing like waves. You're not here for the overpriced stew. You're comparing how foreigners viewed sex and love in Rome, their customs rubbing against the empire's bold ways like a badly tied toga. The city's pulse pounds through the creaky floorboards, and you're trying not to knock over your drink while you catch these cross-cultural whispers, hoping you don't get dragged into a dice game you'd lose. Rome's openness about desire. Think Pompeii's frescoes or Bacchanalia's revels stunned and intrigued its neighbors who brought their own bedroom rules to the Tiber's banks. A fact grounds us. Trade documents from the 1st century CE show merchants from Alexandria and Antioch adopting Roman contracts like those for Livia's marriage, but often adding clauses for their own traditions, such as stricter dowry terms. You're picturing a Syrian trader like Zosimos, his beard oiled, haggling with a Roman wife over her Flavia-like autonomy, baffled by her legal clout. You'd probably mangle a greeting in Greek, earning a smirk, but Zosimos is adapting, learning Rome's game while clutching his own god's amulets. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Egyptian sailors thought Roman women's loose stolas, like Elia's, Herculean knot were invitations to flirt, mistaking fashion for forwardness, much like Drusilla's follow me sandals. Imagine Zosimos offering a lotus charm, only to get a polite Roman brush-off, echoing Gaius's banquet fumbles. You chuckle, thinking it's like misreading a dating app's vibe, but with more linen and cultural baggage. A scholarly debate persists about whether Rome's sexual norms swayed foreigners or sparked pushback. Some say visitors embraced Venus's temple rituals. Others argue they clung to modest codes, eyeing Rome's excess like Marcia's gossip with raised brows. You're unsure, but Zosimos's wary glance suggests he's treading carefully. You overhear a Parthian trader describe a betrothal dance from his homeland, less fluid than Licinia's banquet sway, but heavy with veiled glances, earning nods from Romans intrigued by the restraint. The humor hits when a drunk Roman mimics it, tripping over a stool, much like that Bacchanalia poser's Priapus stunt. Foreigners brought their deities, Isis for Egyptians, Mithras for Persians. But Rome's Priapus and Ceres, with their cheeky bread offerings, often stole the spotlight. You notice a Venus pendant on a barmaid's neck, a local touch amid this global mix, tying back to Sabina's divorce prayers. The tavern's chaos feels like Rome itself, a melting pot where love's rules bent but never broke. The Tiber's glint catches your eye through a grimy window, and you realize Rome's ways, from Quintus's toga swagger to Valeria's rose-scented allure, reshaped foreign hearts while absorbing their sparks. You're starting to admire Zosimos's hustle, navigating desire in a city that flaunts it. The crowd thins and you linger, wondering how he balances Home's rules with Rome's temptations, and what stories he'll carry beyond the Tiber's muddy flow, where love's a universal tongue with endless accents. You're standing in the hushed gloom of a Roman columbarium, the Tiber's faint murmur barely reaching this underground chamber where the air smells of cold stone and the ghost of burnt myrrh. Niches line the walls, stuffed with urns, pottery, and small trinkets glinting under your flickering torch. You're not just visiting a tomb, you're uncovering tales of love etched into Rome's burial goods, where devotion and desire linger in clay and bronze, whispering across centuries. The city's pulse feels distant, and you're trying not to brush against a dusty shelf while you trace these final tokens, hoping you don't disturb the quiet of those who loved here. Roman tombs were treasure troves of the heart, preserving romance for the afterlife with care. A mainstream fact grounds us: grave goods from the 1st century CE, like those in Rome's Via Appia tombs, often included personal items, rings, poems, or paired figurines, symbolizing eternal bonds, much like the marble lovers we saw in that villa's garden. You're holding a small bronze locket, etched with 2 clasped hands, perhaps left by a widower for his wife, like Titus for Paula. You'd probably fumble it, heart catching at its weight, but it's a vow carved for eternity, echoing Livia and Marcus's bread-shared marriage. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some urns held tiny glass vials, once filled with rose oil like Valeria's banquet scent, meant to keep the deceased alluring in the underworld. Imagine a mourner tucking one beside their beloved, hoping Venus notices. You'd smile, thinking it's like slipping perfume into a time capsule for a divine date. Historians still argue whether these goods were practical for the afterlife or pure sentiment. Some say they ensured comfort, like Ceres's spelt cakes. Others think they were gifts, tying survivors to the lost, like Sabina's divorce defiance. You're not sure, but the locket's delicate clasp feels like a whisper of forever. You notice a terracotta plaque showing a couple sharing a cup, their gazes soft, like the frescoes in Pompeii's villas. The humor hits when you spot a tiny Priapus figurine nearby, that cheeky god guarding their eternal spark, as he did for Quintus's bedroom hopes. These goods weren't random. Widows like Marcia, dodging gossip's sting, might have chosen them to honor a love lost, or children like Vibia placed them for parents, like Cornelia's betrothal dreams. You recall Titus and Paula's taberna banter, their love outlasting youth. Here, it's sealed in clay, a defiance of time's theft, unlike Gaius's fleeting love curse. The torchlight wavers, and you realize these burial goods were Rome's love letters, written in objects to outlast the Tiber's flow. You're starting to feel their weight, the way they anchor Flavia's market power or Drusilla's Subura grit to something eternal. The columbarium's silence wraps around you, broken only by your soft steps, and you linger, wondering what stories these urns hold, and how Rome's lovers ensured their hearts would echo, even when their voices faded into the city's endless, starlit dust. You're reclining on a grassy slope by the Tiber, the river's surface shimmering with stars that seem to hum with Rome's ancient breath. The air is cool, scented with damp earth and wild mint, and the city's distant glow. Torches, lamps, the flicker of insula feels like a heartbeat softening into night. You're not just stargazing, you're reflecting on love's lasting legacy in ancient Rome, how it wove through villas, taverns, and tombs, shaping lives from emperors to dock workers. The water's gentle lap cradles your thoughts, and you're letting the stories we've wandered through settle, tying them into a final, quiet thread under the endless sky. Love in Rome was a force, not just a fleeting spark. It built families, fueled empires, and left marks as enduring as the Colosseum. A mainstream fact anchors us. Inscriptions from the 1st century CE, like those on Palatine Hill, praise Venus as the mother of Rome, her name etched beside vows of fidelity and fertility, from Claudia's patrician bed to Livia's plebeian vows. You're picturing couples like Titus and Paula, their taberna laughter, or Marcia, braving gossip's sting, each holding love's thread through Rome's chaos. You'd probably sigh, wishing for their grit, but their stories flow with the Tiber, linking past to present, like Venus's temple wine still poured in memory. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans believed lovers' souls could become stars, watching over the city, guiding hearts below with their light. Imagine Flavia whispering to her beloved, promising to find him in the sky, like that rose vial left in a tomb. You'd smile, thinking it's like naming a constellation for a crush, but with cosmic weight. Historians still argue whether Rome's view of love was unique or shared across borders. Some say the Tiber's passion, from Bacchanalia's revels to Aelia's Herculean knot, set it apart. Others think neighbors like Zosimos's Syrians loved with equal fire, as we heard in that port tavern. You're not sure, but the stars above feel heavy with every story, from Gaius's lovesick tablet to Drusilla's Subura swagger. You trail your fingers through the grass, recalling moments, Licinia's banquet dance, Sabina's divorce defiance, the marble lover's eternal clasp. The humor hits one last time as you picture Quintus, still clutching his Priapus charm, hoping for one more spark, like Publius's clumsy Ovid recitals. Love was Rome's pulse, messy yet sacred, driving frescoes, curses, even weasel liver potions, each a stitch in the empire's vibrant weave. You feel the Tiber's current, steady as the devotion that built this city, from Venus's altar to the columbarium's quiet urns, and it's soothing, like a lullaby sung by stone as the night deepens. The stars grow softer, their light a gentle blanket over your thoughts. You're safe here, held by tales of Rome's lovers, from Vibia's shy mirror gaze to Titus' silver-haired flirtations. The Tiber's flow slows, its ripples fading into a whisper, and your worries drift away, carried downstream. Let the river hold you. Let the stars guide you, and let Rome's heart sing you into rest. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and sink into the quiet, where love's oldest stories glow, leading you to dreams as vast as the empire's endless sky. Sweet dreams.